Following some of the most recent shootings in America, government officials have been pushing various pieces of legislation to restrict gun ownership. Now, the claim is that to end gun violence, we need more legislation. But many are overlooking or intentionally ignoring the failure of prosecutors, particularly those on the left, to enforce the current gun laws that we have and to crack down on gun crime. We've done that in the past, where we have had more aggressive prosecution of gun crimes, and guess what? It works. So is it really more laws that we need to respond to this surge in violent crime? With me now to talk about this and more is Chad Wolf, former acting secretary of the U.S. Department of Homeland Security, now chairman for the Center of Homeland Security and Immigration Policy at American First Policy Institute. Chad, welcome back to the program.
Well, thanks for having me, Tony.
So let me ask you this. You've been in law enforcement for a long time. You've seen a lot. What do you think about this heightened focus on gun laws that's simply restricting gun ownership as opposed to the criminal use of those guns?
Well, I think you had it right. I think when we take a look at these different incidents that are going on across the country, I think it's okay to talk about, are there ways in which we can look at different laws to see if they need to be tightened. But I think the first reaction of just imposing more and more gun control laws and putting those on the books when certain gun laws right now are not being enforced. And what we know are that criminals, by the very nature and the definition of being a criminal or being someone that is very intent on doing a very bad thing, they don't pay attention to these laws. They are intent on getting a weapon and doing harm. They are likely going to do it. So a lot of our time and a lot of our attention and effort needs to be put back on the mental health issues facing our country, the fatherless issues facing our youth, and getting back to some of the morality issues facing this country. I think that goes a long way to addressing some of the issues that we're facing in Uvalde and certainly other places of what's going on out there. Just simply saying we need more restrictions on our Second Amendment rights, I don't think is really going to solve the underlying problem.
You are spot on, because I think when you look at the number of laws that we have on the books today, just passing a law is not going to stop a problem. Right. Because you said, if people are going to violate one law, they're going to violate another law. And I do think we've got to step back, and I've been advocating this with policymakers, especially among the Republicans mostly, because the Democrats don't want to touch this. It's the morality issue. It is the heart. And when you talk about that, you go back to what George Washington warned. He said, look, if you want peace and prosperity, you have to have morality. And don't think you can have morality without religion. And we've spent decades now, fortunately, we've had a couple of court decisions here recently that's starting to reverse this process, but we've had policymakers pushing God out of the public square, and any conversation about him and morality is out the window.
Well, it's not only pushing it out of the public square, it's pushing it out of the hearts and minds of our youth, whether they're seeing it on television, or I should say not seeing it on television, and the video games culture and everything else. It's not front and center as it used to be, and that is that the faith in the faith community. And so I think there's a role to play there. Obviously, I go back to the mental health issues facing the country. There probably needs to be some more investment on addressing that issue as well. It's not just one issue. It's not just one solution that we need to look at. We need to start looking at a variety of solutions. We have to identify that this is a crisis that we actually need to spend some time and attention and focus on, and not simply say, oh, we need another gun control measure that's going to solve the issue. It's not going to solve the issue. I think most reasonable people know it's not going to solve the issue.
Yeah, it makes policymakers feel good, and they can go home and go back to business as usual. I do want to talk about the mental health thing, because there has been bipartisan focus on mental health. This measure that was passed is going to increase funding for mental health. But I don't think, going back to what you said about morality and religion, I don't think we can separate mental health from the faith community either, because a lot of this is driven by a sense of desperation, lack of purpose, things that that religion provides in a young man's life. And so I think we can't separate that. And we're still seeing in some of these programs, religious entities are not to be involved. This is all, clinical, this is secular. And I think that's only going to make the problem worse.
Well, I would agree with you. Look, anytime that we divorce or we somehow exclude certain communities or populations, and in this case, the faith-based community, from certain solution sets, saying that you can't receive funding to address mental health issues because of your faith, we know that that doesn't work in the long run. We know that you need a sort of an all of the above approach. And there are certain segments of the population, whether these are youths that are in trouble or others, that may be open to a faith-based community approach, may be open to that type of audience, talking to them in a way that a law enforcement officer or another individual in their community may not be. So to shut these different avenues off, I think is not the right approach. I certainly agree with you.
I want to switch gears, something that you are extremely familiar with, and that is our border. As the acting Secretary of Homeland Security, you spent a lot of time there. In fact, I saw the change myself with my own eyes, where there was, a rush across the border when you guys first took office, and then under your leadership, I mean, there was nothing. It was a ghost town on our southern border. Texas, without the administration doing anything, we're having these record numbers of illegals crossing the country, crossing the border. So they're taking it on themselves to protect their border. Now we have the Department of Justice investigating the state of Texas for protecting their own borders. Is that a misplaced focus?
Well, of course it is. And it just goes to show you sort of the backwards priorities of the Biden administration when it comes to border security and immigration enforcement. They don't have a strategy. What we continue to see is a historic crisis. And when I say that, it's not just it's higher than it's ever been. It's higher than it's ever been by a factor of 2 or 3 or 4 that we are seeing. And we're seeing this lawlessness across this border. But we also continue to see the administration doubling down on certain rules and regulations that can continue to attract and continue to incentivize this illegal behavior. And if you're an American, you're American sitting in the middle of the country or somewhere else, or even in Texas or Arizona along that border, you're throwing your hands up and you're saying, what's it going to take? What's it going to take for this administration to actually become serious about securing the border, securing American communities, stopping the human trafficking, and stopping the illegal narcotics coming across the border? What is it going to take? Clearly, the numbers alone are not swaying the administration. They continue to go down this strategy that each and every month it gets worse and worse and worse. And so I get frustrated knowing that there are solutions out there to secure that border. It takes leadership, it takes will, and it takes an ability to make some hard decisions, knowing that you're going to upset certain folks. But if you decide to put Americans first and you decide to look after their best interests first, then I think the policy solutions present themselves to you in a way that becomes very, very clear. And we certainly did that under the Trump administration. And there's a way to fix this crisis. Unfortunately, they have dug the hole so deep that it's going to take them months and months and months to dig out of it if they choose to dig out of it.
Right. Secretary, we got to leave it there. Thanks so much for joining us. Always great to see you.